Welcome to the deep dive. Have you ever stood before a painting and felt a strange pull, like you weren't just observing a static image, but maybe peering through a portal into something?
Hmm.
Well, something far grander, far more profound.
Mm.
Today we're stepping through one of those very portals. It's a masterpiece that kind of defies easy categorization, an astonishing work that isn't merely a landscape, but a vivid window into the very soul of a city.
Yeah.
We're talking about El Greco's iconic view of Toledo. It's distinctive, it's dramatic, and it's unlike any other city painting you've probably ever encountered because it asks you to see not just with your eyes, but with something deeper.
That's perfectly put. View of Toledo is far more than just a topographical depiction. It really is a profound meditation on a city's spiritual essence, sort of an in-depth exploration of its very spirit.
Right.
And for this particular exploration, we're drawing from the sources you've shared with us, focusing on the intricate layers of meaning El Greco infused into this incredible work, specifically as it captures the city around that pivotal year, 1599.
1599. Okay.
Yeah, it's a moment where Toledo, though maybe waning a bit in political power, was just vibrating with this deep, complex spiritual energy.
So our mission today is to truly unpack how El Greco, this extraordinary artist, managed to transform a tangible, bustling, historic city, with its stone walls and ancient rivers, into this profound spiritual and symbolic experience.
Mm.
We're going to journey through the artist's own fascinating life, delve into the tumultuous historical context he painted within, uncover the astonishing technical secrets embedded in the canvas, decipher its deeper metaphysical meanings, and finally explore its enduring and actually surprisingly modern legacy in the art world.
Yeah, it connects forward in interesting ways.
Exactly. Our aim, as always, is to help you gain a quick yet thorough understanding of this complex masterpiece, complete with, hopefully, surprising facts and those truly illuminating aha moments that make learning so compelling.
Those are the best moments.
They really are. So with that, let's unpack this incredible vision of Toledo.
Let's do it.
To truly understand View of Toledo, to grasp its radical departure from convention, we have to start with a man who held the brush, Domenikos Theotokopoulos, universally known as El Greco.
The Greek.
The Greek, right. His life story alone is a fascinating narrative, a true odyssey that forged his utterly unique artistic vision. His journey from one world to another, absorbing and then transforming.
Yeah.
Well, it's key to everything we see in this painting.
Indeed. El Greco was born in 1541, not in Spain, which surprises some people, but on the sun-drenched island of Crete.
Crete, okay.
At that time, Crete was a Venetian colony, though it existed very much under the looming shadow of Ottoman rule. This early environment was absolutely crucial to his development because his initial training was in Byzantine icon painting.
Okay. Byzantine icons, that feels important.
It's fundamental. Now think about that for a moment. This is an art form rooted deeply in spiritual representation, where the primary aim was never a realistic depiction, not at all.
Right, it's symbolic.
Exactly. The focus was on conveying the divine, the intangible, the eternal. Icons were, windows into the sacred, designed to inspire devotion, not to replicate earthly scenes. This early immersion instilled in him, right from the start, a profound sense of the spiritual dimension in art.
So it wasn't just about what you saw.
Precisely. It was fundamentally about what you felt, what you believed, and what you transcended. Figures were elongated, faces stylized, and spatial depth often compressed, all for symbolic effect, to move the viewer beyond the physical realm.
So he's steeped in these deeply spiritual, almost otherworldly Byzantine influences, which, as you say, is an incredibly unique foundation. Most European artists of his time weren't starting there.
Not at all.
Then he makes this monumental transition to Italy, right? He dives headfirst into the heart of the Renaissance, a world dramatically different from Crete.
Precisely. From Crete, he journeys to Venice, a crucible of color and light, and then on to Rome, the epicenter of classical antiquity and high Renaissance ideals.
Big shift.
Huge. Here he encounters the towering giants of the Renaissance, the vibrant palettes of Venetian masters like Titian and Tintoretto.
Right, the colorists.
Exactly, who taught him the expressive power of color and dynamic brushwork. And then the monumental forms and dramatic compositions of Michelangelo in Rome, from whom he absorbed lessons in anatomy, classical forms, and the construction of monumental narratives.
So he learned all the rules.
He learned the mathematical rules of of linear perspective, the very system designed to create the illusion of three-dimensional space on a flat canvas, bringing unparalleled realism to art. He mastered all the rules of the established artistic world of his day.
Okay.
But what's truly fascinating, and what distinguishes him so profoundly, is that while he absorbed these classical forms and technical skills, he never simply imitated them. He was always developing what he called his inner vision, pushing beyond mere representation to forge a truly original artistic language.
His inner vision.
Yes. He took the profound lessons of these masters and, rather than strictly adhering to them, he began twisting them, stretching them, exaggerating them, making them entirely his own to serve that deep-seated spiritual impulse he carried from his Byzantine roots. He wasn't aiming for perfection of form necessarily, but for perfection of spirit.
And that inner vision, that deeply personal interpretation, really is the key to his signature style, isn't it? When you look at an El Greco, even if you've never seen it before, you almost instinctively know it's an El Greco.
You really do.
What are those distinct characteristics that truly define his work, particularly as they culminate in a piece like View of Toledo?
Well, there are several defining traits, and they are strikingly consistent across his mature work. First, his figures are famously elongated, dramatic, and incredibly flexible, almost as if they're caught in a divine wind or a surge of spiritual energy.
Right, that stretched look.
Yeah. This elongation isn't a mistake or just a stylistic flourish for its own sake. It's a deliberate artistic choice meant to convey spiritual ascension, a yearning to reach beyond the physical and mundane. It kind of defies gravity, making the earthly feel ethereal.
Okay.
Secondly, you'll notice his powerful color contrasts, often vibrant, sometimes clashing, creating this intense emotional charge. He uses color not just descriptively, but expressively to evoke mood and feeling rather than strict realism. His blues, greens, and those acid yellows are particularly distinctive.
Very distinct.
Thirdly, his brushstrokes are incredibly dynamic, free, and visible, conveying immense movement and energy, making the canvas feel vibrantly alive. There's a sense of urgency and motion.
You can almost see his hand moving.
Absolutely. And underpinning all of this is a pervasive, deep, mystic atmosphere that truly transports you, the viewer, out of the mundane and into a realm of spiritual intensity. These features truly reach their peak during his time in Toledo, making View of Toledo a quintessential product of his mature period, a true synthesis of his unique journey and his profound artistic philosophy.
So he arrives in Spain, specifically Toledo, and finds this city that somehow perfectly resonates with his artistic soul.
Yeah.
But what was Toledo truly like in 1599? Because the sources emphasize it was a city of profound, even fascinating contradictions.
Yes.
A place of waning political power, but enduring spiritual dominance.
It truly was a city caught between two worlds, and this tension is vital to understanding the painting. By 1599, Toledo had, in a practical sense, lost its political preeminence to Madrid.
Madrid was rising.
Right, which had become the new, more centrally located capital. Philip II had officially moved the court to Madrid decades earlier, signifying a shift in temporal power. But despite this decline in political authority, Toledo remained Spain's undisputed religious core.
The spiritual center.
Absolutely. It was the seat of the Primate of Spain, the Archbishop of Toledo, and crucially, the very heart of the Catholic Inquisition.
Wow, the Inquisition's heartland.
Indeed. It was a city where faith permeated every aspect of life, dominating the cultural, intellectual, and social landscape. This dual identity, a city experiencing a kind of earthly decline in political influence, yet simultaneously asserting its enduring spiritual dominance, is absolutely key to understanding the profound spiritual weight El Greco bestowed upon it in his painting. The city was a paradox of earthly decline and heavenly ascendance, a living testament to an older, more sacred order in a changing world.
And Toledo itself was just layers upon layers of history, wasn't it? You can see it in the architecture, the very fabric of the city, a truly unique blend of cultures and eras.
Precisely. Toledo's rich, multi-layered past was physically inscribed in its architecture, bearing the distinct traces of Roman foundations, Visigothic structures, centuries of Muslim rule leaving behind the exquisite Mudejar style.
Beautiful style.
And then the reconquest by Christian kingdoms. It was a crucible of civilizations where synagogues, mosques, and churches stood often side by side, testifying to its multicultural past, even if that past was increasingly suppressed by the Counter-Reformation.
right? Things were changing.
They were, and
Yeah.
at the very heart of this historical tapestry, dominating its skyline and its spiritual consciousness, was the magnificent Toledo Cathedral. This monumental Gothic structure, with its later additions, served as the central symbol of the city's sacred and social power. It wasn't just a building.
Yeah.
It was an embodiment of Toledo's identity, its history, its spiritual authority, and its unwavering religious doctrine. Its very presence was a powerful statement of enduring faith.
This was also the Siglo de Oro, the Spanish Golden Age,
Yeah.
right? A time of immense flourishing in art, literature, philosophy, which sounds like it would have been an incredibly vibrant environment for an artist.
It was vibrant, yes.
But the sources also point to a darker shadow, the Catholic Reformation, and the ever-present specter of the Inquisition. How did these broader sociocultural contexts impact artistic freedom, especially for someone as, well, unorthodox as El Greco?
It's a truly fascinating and often contradictory period. While the Spanish Golden Age brought forth incredible masterpieces from literary giants like Cervantes and Lope de Vega and later painters like Velázquez, it was also a time of intense religious fervor and strict ideological control. The Catholic Reformation, a direct response to the Protestant Reformation, sought to reinforce Catholic dogma and moral order. The Inquisition, in particular, was the mechanism for enforcing this orthodoxy, extending its reach into all aspects of life, including the arts.
Into the arts as well.
Oh, yes. This meant that art was not merely for aesthetic pleasure. It was expected to serve a didactic purpose, to convey rigid, orthodox religious messages, to reinforce dogma, and to inspire piety. There was strict censorship, and artists had to be careful not to depict anything that could be interpreted as heretical or irreverent.
Sounds restrictive.
It could have stifled many artists, absolutely, forcing them into a conformist mold.
So on one hand, a blossoming of culture, on the other, a very tight leash on expression. It's hard to imagine how an artist like El Greco, with his unique, almost wild vision, could thrive under such constraints.
It's a brilliant paradox, isn't it? For many artists, these restrictive conditions meant adherence to established iconographic forms and realistic depiction that reinforced the church's narratives. However, for El Greco, these very constraints seem to have paradoxically strengthened his mystical and symbolic narrative.
How so?
Instead of depicting outward, literal realities, which might have been more easily scrutinized for doctrinal correctness, he was pushed towards exploring internal, spiritual realities. He couldn't always depict the world as it literally was, perhaps, but he could certainly depict the world as it felt to him, as it revealed its divine essence, its soul, its profound connection to the metaphysical. This pushed him towards a unique, highly subjective form of expression.
So the distortions, the colors.
His distortions, his non-naturalistic colors, his dramatic compositions, they weren't just stylistic choices. They became his language to speak of the divine without directly contravening the strictures of realism that might otherwise invite scrutiny. It allowed him to delve deeper into the inner rather than the external reality of faith.
That's a vital connection to make how the pressure of conformity can sometimes push genius towards a more profound internal truth. It's almost like the restrictions forced him to invent a new way of seeing.
Exactly.
To create a vision so personal it became universal, a kind of transcendent rebellion.
Precisely. It forced him to distill his message, to abstract it from the merely physical, and to infuse it with an even greater spiritual intensity that resonated on a different, more symbolic level. He found freedom and subjectivity in depicting the unseen reality behind the visible.
So, with that profound background in mind, let's turn our attention to the canvas itself and truly decode what El Greco is doing here. Because View of Toledo is a horizontal panoramic city view on a medium-sized canvas, which on the surface sounds quite conventional for a landscape of its time.
It does on the surface.
But as we know, it is anything but conventional. What makes its technical uniqueness so impactful, so revolutionary?
You're absolutely right. While the basic format is common, El Greco's approach to perspective and composition is revolutionary. The crucial insight here, a real aha moment, is that he fundamentally prioritizes depicting the city's spiritual essence over strict realistic or topographical perspective.
Right, it's soul, not the map.
Exactly. This isn't about mapping Toledo accurately brick by brick. It's about revealing its soul, its inherent divinity. He uses an exceptionally high horizon line, which is highly unusual for a landscape of this period.
High horizon, okay.
Yeah. This dramatic choice makes the city appear to rise upwards from a distant lower plane, almost as if ascending towards the heavens. It creates an immediate sense of aspiration, of elevation, both physical and spiritual.
And it's not just an effect, it's a deliberate distortion, a radical rejection of the very principles of classical linear perspective that he himself had mastered in Italy.
Absolutely.
I mean, the sources explicitly mention exaggerated city silhouettes and disproportionate structures. He's not trying to fool your eye, he's trying to speak directly to your soul,
That's it.
to bypass the literal and go straight to the symbolic.
Exactly. He engages in what art historians call intentional distortion, a deliberate and conscious departure from classical linear perspective, rules that mathematical system perfected during the Renaissance that creates the illusion of rational, measurable depth and realism on a flat canvas.
Right, the one-point perspective stuff.
Yes. This wasn't a mistake due to a lack of skill. El Greco was a highly trained and masterful draftsman, capable of rendering perfect perspective if he chose. Instead, it was a profound artistic choice, a philosophical statement.
Okay.
A prime example, and one of the most striking, is the Toledo Cathedral's towers. They're depicted as unusually elevated and disproportionately large compared to their actual size and their relation to other buildings in Toledo.
They really loom large.
They do. He's not simply showing you a building, he's visually articulating its immense, overarching spiritual and architectural grandeur, its dominant role as the spiritual heart of the city, almost as if it's straining upwards towards the dramatic sky. Compare this to a contemporary like Jan Vermeer,
Vermeer, yeah, very different.
whose meticulous use of linear perspective allowed him to capture the quiet, rational order of domestic scenes, or Toledo, whose precise architectural renderings aim for almost photographic accuracy. El Greco completely subverts that expectation.
It's almost like he's asking you, the viewer, to look at the city not with your physical eyes, the ones that measure and categorize, but with your soul, with an inner sight that perceives deeper truths.
Yes.
The true essence of a place isn't always found in its precise measurements, but in its emotional, spiritual, and symbolic impact. That's a truly revolutionary idea.
That's a perfect analogy. He's inviting you to a different kind of perception, one that existed long before photography. And his use of color is also absolutely critical in creating this unique, almost supernatural atmosphere. It's not just a backdrop.
No.
It's an active participant in the narrative.
Oh, the colors.
Yeah.
They're so distinct, so unlike anything else from his time. The dominance of those dramatic yellows, greens, and blues, which are so typical of his mature palette, create a very specific mood, almost a sense of unease or profound mystery.
Yes, there's an intensity.
But it's the sky, particularly, that absolutely grabs you. The clouds are dramatically active, turbulent, often abstracted far beyond any natural appearance. They're not just clouds, they're almost living entities.
That's precisely right. This creates a truly supernatural atmosphere. The dramatic color use, especially in the turbulent, storm-laden sky, isn't just about capturing weather patterns. It creates an ethereal, otherworldly ambience.
Otherworldly is the word.
These swirling, often sickly green or phosphorescent clouds, lit by flashes of unearthly yellow, suggest a divine presence, a cosmic drama unfolding above the city. It's as if the divine will itself is actively participating in Toledo's spiritual narrative.
Wow.
This is not merely a sky, it's a manifestation of God's power and judgment, a visual representation of a spiritual tempest or a revelation. The light breaks through in an unnatural way, illuminating certain elements below, almost as if touched by a higher power.
And the brushwork itself is so incredibly dynamic, almost loose, which feels unbelievably modern for the time. It almost foreshadows Impressionism, doesn't it? The texture, the energy, it's palpable.
It absolutely does in a striking way. El Greco's brush technique is characterized by incredibly free, dynamic, and visible strokes. He isn't aiming for meticulous detail or a smooth, invisible finish, which was typical of many Renaissance masters.
No sleek surfaces here.
Not at all. Instead, his focus is on conveying the general atmosphere, the emotional intensity, and the overall impression of light and form. City structures and natural elements are drawn impressionistically, with broad, suggestive strokes rather than precise lines.
Suggestive, yeah.
You can see the movement of his hand, the texture of the paint, almost feeling the energy he poured into it. The implication here is profound. His focus is on feeling and mood, on the subjective experience, rather than photographic accuracy.
Right.
This approach indeed hints directly at later art movements like Impressionism, which would centuries later prioritize the artist's subjective perception and the transient effects of light over exact representation. He was truly ahead of his time in that regard, valuing the sense of a thing over its fact, anticipating a radical shift in artistic intent.
Let's talk more about the city's features themselves. We've mentioned the cathedral as the dominant structure, but it bears repeating its central and disproportionate importance. It's almost a character in itself within this spiritual drama.
It is, very much so. The Toledo Cathedral is not just central geographically in the composition, but absolutely central symbolically. Its immense, exaggerated size in the painting is a visual statement of both its architectural grandeur. It truly was a marvel of Gothic engineering and, more importantly, its overwhelming religious authority and power in 16th century Spain.
It just dominates.
It visually dominates the canvas, towering over every other structure, not just physically, but symbolically. It is the city's spiritual heart, the bastion of faith, and El Greco makes sure you cannot miss that. He's not just painting a building, he's painting a monument to faith itself, to the enduring power of the church. It's the fixed point in a swirling, dynamic landscape.
And yet, he integrates nature and architecture so seamlessly, even if dramatically. The Toledo River famously encircling the city, the jagged hills, the sparse green areas, they're all there, but they, too, feel imbued with this powerful spiritual energy.
Yes.
Almost part of the same living organism.
Yes, even nature is rendered dramatically, not just realistically. The winding Toledo River, with its dark, reflective waters and the undulating, almost craggy hills surrounding the city, contribute to the dynamic composition, echoing the spiritual dynamism of the sky.
Echoing the sky, yeah.
The natural elements are not merely background, they are partners in the drama. They seem almost to participate in the ascent of the city, their forms echoing the elongated upward thrust of the buildings. The city's physical form, embraced and surrounded by these dramatically rendered natural elements, seems almost sculpted by a higher spirit, a divine hand. And the way the urban fabric of the city itself is laid out.
Right, the houses, the churches, the small streets, the walls, all in a tight, compressed order. But it's not the actual order, is it? It's not how Toledo would appear on a map.
No, absolutely not a cartographic rendering, and this is another crucial point. The key here is that this arrangement reflects the artist's mystic order for the city, rather than its exact real-life layout.
Mystic order, I like that.
El Greco wasn't interested in presenting a tourist guide or a literal topographical record. He was interested in the city's internal spiritual coherence, how its various parts fit into a grand, divinely inspired scheme. He rearranged buildings, compressed space, and elevated features to serve his spiritual vision.
Okay.
He's showing you the divine blueprint of Toledo, the theological essence of the city as a place of faith and spiritual striving, not its architectural blueprint or municipal plan. It's an idealized, almost platonic vision of the city, representing its spiritual reality rather than its physical one.
This leads us perfectly into the thematic layers of the painting, because View of Toledo is so much more than just a view. It's a profound metaphysical narrative, a visual sermon, if you will.
It really is.
Can you unpack the profound spiritual message embedded in that upward gaze, that sense of spiritual ascent?
Certainly. The elevated depiction of the city, particularly the towering cathedral and the entire cityscape that seems to strain upwards, isn't just a compositional choice. It's deeply symbolic, carrying a profound spiritual message. It represents the human soul's ascent towards God, a yearning for integration with the sacred.
The whole city is reaching up.
Exactly. The city itself becomes a metaphor for the spiritual journey, a place of pilgrimage and transcendence. The composition literally lifts your gaze, guiding your eye from the mundane earthly elements up towards the turbulent yet awe-inspiring heavens. It's a visual prayer, an expression of spiritual aspiration that suggests humanity's constant striving for the divine. It embodies a Neoplatonic idea common in the Renaissance, where beauty and truth in the physical world are mere reflections or shadows of a higher, perfect spiritual realm. Toledo, in El Greco's vision, becomes a tangible representation of this intangible spiritual aspiration.
So, for you, the listener, what does it truly mean for a landscape, a painting of buildings and hills, to represent a spiritual journey? How does this painting convey the deepest yearning of the human soul? It's a radical idea for its time and still resonates today.
It truly is radical. And this spiritual ascent is underscored by the very atmosphere of the painting, where the divine hand is almost palpable, an active presence.
You feel it in the sky.
Absolutely. The dramatic movement of the clouds, the intense, almost unnatural distribution of light in the sky, these aren't just weather effects. They are portrayed as direct reflections of divine power, of God's active involvement in the earthly realm. The way a brilliant, almost blinding light bursts through the storm clouds to illuminate key structures, particularly the cathedral,
Spotlighting it.
suggests moments of divine revelation or judgment. This creates a powerful mystical connection between nature and divine will, suggesting God's active, visible presence shaping the world and everything within it. The storm clouds are not just rain-bearing, they are, in El Greco's mystical vision, God-bearing, full of spiritual significance.
And bringing it back to the context of 1599 Toledo, the painting really embodies the reign of faith, doesn't it? The social and religious power dynamic of the time is undeniable, almost overwhelmingly present in the canvas.
It absolutely does. The cathedral's central and overwhelmingly dominant placement in the composition clearly illustrates the overwhelming dominance of religion and the church in Spanish society during that period. Toledo, as the ecclesiastical capital, was defined by its faith.
Faith was everything.
The city's architecture and urban fabric, the tightly packed houses, the winding streets, the defensive walls, are shown as a structure that surrounds and protects the church's immense power. It's a visual metaphor for how the entire society revolved around and was defined by its faith, how daily life was inextricably linked to spiritual authority. A physical city is meticulously, albeit mystically, built around and subservient to the spiritual authority embodied by its great cathedral. It's a visual testament to the Counter-Reformation's triumph, where the church reasserted its absolute authority.
And all these distortions, the manipulation of perspective and dimensions, they're not just stylistic quirks, are they? They're the very tools that allow the painting to transcend near time and space, to become something timeless.
Yes, precisely. By manipulating perspective and dimensions, by deliberately departing from naturalistic representation, El Greco transforms view of Toledo from a mere temporal or spatial image, a snapshot of a particular place at a specific time, into an eternal, sacred place.
Beyond 1599.
Exactly. It's not just Toledo in 1599. It's an idealized, timeless Toledo, a spiritual archetype that exists beyond the confines of earthly reality. He takes the tangible and makes it transcendent, elevating it into a symbol of enduring spiritual truth, a universal statement about humanity's relationship with the divine.
Wow.
The viewer is transported not just to Toledo, but to an idea of Toledo, a city infused with profound spiritual meaning, a kind of eternal city of faith.
So where does View of Toledo fit into the grand sweep of art history?
Yeah.
Because it feels like it's doing something entirely new, forging its own path, yet it's undeniably rooted in what came before.
Yes, it's complex.
The movements and ideas that shaped the era.
It truly sits at a fascinating stylistic crossroads, a unique position that makes it so compelling. Art historians widely consider View of Toledo to be one of the most influential and quintessential examples of mannerism in Spain.
Mannerism.
Mannerism as a movement emerged as a conscious reaction to the classical idealism, rational order, and harmonious balance of the High Renaissance. Where Renaissance art sought perfection and naturalism, mannerism often embraced artificiality, tension, instability, and emotional exaggeration.
A reaction against perfection.
In a way, yes. It intentionally distorted figures in space, prioritizing emotional expression, elegant artificiality, and sophisticated complexity over naturalistic representation. El Greco's unique way of shaping the city and sky.
Yeah.
Well, with those elongated forms, the really dramatic contrast, that psychological intensity, that's a really strong indicator of this whole mannerist aesthetic. He took those mannerist tendencies, the exaggerated elegance, the deliberate contortion of classical norms, and infused them with his unparalleled spiritual intensity, pushing them to an even more profound, almost visionary level.
But it also feels like there are undeniable hints of what's coming next, doesn't it? Elements that bridge it directly to the burgeoning Baroque period.
Oh, absolutely.
Almost as if he's peering into the future of art.
Absolutely. While firmly mannerist in its embrace of distortion and intellectual complexity, View of Toledo undeniably carries the dramatic light, intense emotionality, and dynamic energy that would become characteristic of early Baroque art.
Like what specifically?
Well, the richness of the colors, the profound struggle between dramatic light and deep darkness, what we call chiaroscuro, especially in the sky.
Right, the light and dark.
And the sheer emotional depth of the painting, its sense of movement and grand drama, all mark this transition. Think of the intense theatricality of early Baroque masters like Caravaggio.
Caravaggio, yes.
Who used stark contrasts of light and shadow to heighten emotional impact, or the dynamic movement found in the sculptures of Bernini. El Greco's work shares this theatricality, this emotional urgency, and this profound engagement with spiritual drama. It's almost as if El Greco, through his unique vision, was peering into the future of art.
So it's both Mannerist and Baroque.
This dual classification, being both a peak of mannerism and a potent foreshadowing of Baroque, makes the work even more fascinating, showcasing El Greco as an artist who was, in many ways, ahead of his time, truly carving his own independent path that transcended simple categories.
Let's delve into the actual craft, the materials, and technique. It's clear he's drawing on the rich Italian influences he absorbed, particularly from Venice.
Definitely Venice.
But the execution feels utterly unique. Unmistakably Spanish, unmistakably El Greco.
His technique during this period is indeed closely related to Italian painting traditions, particularly the Venetian school, which famously emphasized colorido, the primacy of color and light over disegno, drawing or line.
Color over line.
Yes. He famously preferred oil paint, which allowed him to achieve those rich, vibrant hues, those subtle gradations of light and shadow, and that incredible textural quality. The choice of oil paint was crucial, as it allowed for the layering and blending necessary for his dramatic atmospheric effects. The canvas surface itself reveals his mastery and his distinctive approach.
And the surface and shine of the painting are also quite distinctive, right? It's not just flat paint, it has a living quality to it.
That's absolutely correct. Unlike many of his contemporaries who aimed for a smooth, polished, almost invisible brushstroke, El Greco's canvas surface features incredibly fine, dynamic, and visible brushstrokes.
You can see them.
Clearly, this creates a palpable texture, almost a relief on the surface. This isn't just decorative, it's highly functional. This texture allows light to reflect at different angles across the painting, giving it a lively, almost shimmering quality, especially under changing light conditions. Furthermore, he often employed thin layers of color, almost glazes, and transparent touches, which gave the work both incredible volume and a mystical luminosity. It's almost as if the light emanates from within the painting itself, contributing to that supernatural, ethereal atmosphere we discussed earlier. You can feel the energy of his hand, the way he built up the layers of paint, giving it a vibrant, almost breathing quality.
It's abundantly clear that El Greco had this profound, almost spiritual, enduring fascination with Toledo throughout his life. It wasn't just a place he lived and worked. He was his muse, a profound source of inspiration.
Oh, undoubtedly. His deep admiration and profound connection for Toledo is evident in how he returned to it again and again, immortalizing the city's complex history, its unique spirit, and its commanding architecture through his art. View of Toledo is not merely a city painting. It is an externalization of the artist's own inner world, his spiritual journey, and his philosophical beliefs. It's a testament to his personal connection to the city's mystical heart, his understanding of it as a microcosm of spiritual aspiration.
He really felt the city.
He saw Toledo as a kind of living entity, a symbol, and he poured his own soul, his own fervent beliefs into depicting it. It was both a physical place and a spiritual crucible for him.
And this unique approach, this willingness to distort reality, to imbue a landscape with such a deep, mystical atmosphere and abstract form, resonated far beyond his own time. The sources tell us he was seen as a kind of modernist precursor.
Yes, surprisingly so.
Influencing artists centuries later. That's a truly remarkable legacy for a 16th century master.
Absolutely remarkable. View of Toledo, along with his other works, garnered significant interest from 19th and 20th century modernists precisely because of these qualities. These artists who were increasingly exploring subjective reality, emotional expression, and abstraction.
Like the Expressionists.
Exactly, like the German Expressionists, or even earlier Symbolists. They found a kindred spirit in El Greco's radical willingness to distort reality for a deeper, more personal, more felt truth. His work, by liberating form from strict representation and prioritizing inner vision over external accuracy, effectively opened doors for completely new ways of seeing and depicting the world.
It makes you wonder, how might El Greco's approach have resonated with artists like the German Expressionists, for instance, with their focus on emotional intensity and distorted forms, or even someone like Picasso, particularly in his Blue period, or later Cubists who fractured reality. It's almost as if he gave them permission, centuries in advance, to break free from the literal, to find truth in distortion.
Indeed. He showed that art could be less about documenting what the eye perceives and more about conveying what the soul feels and what the spirit knows. This kind of freedom from objective reality was a revolutionary concept in his time, and it resonated deeply with the avant-garde movements to come. Artists grappling with the emotional turmoil of the modern age, or seeking to represent subjective experience, found in El Greco a precedent for art that could transcend mere appearances and delve into psychological and spiritual depths. His work was a powerful affirmation that art could be a window not just onto the world, but into the artist's deepest self, and by extension, into universal human experience.
Wow.
He really laid some of the groundwork for modern art's focus on individual expression and emotional impact.
As we wrap up this deep dive, it's abundantly clear that View of Toledo is a prime example of El Greco's mastery, a profound testament to his unique genius, and a work that truly prioritizes inner and spiritual reality over mere historical or topographical accuracy.
It's a masterpiece that depicts not just a 16th century Spanish city, but a city's sanctity, its complex historical layers, its architectural power, and its very divine existence. It's a powerful statement on the spiritual weight of place and the transformative power of belief.
The deliberate deformation of physical reality, that incredibly unique perspective, and the dramatic, almost supernatural use of color and light, all these elements are not just stylistic flourishes or arbitrary choices.
No, they're intentional.
They are direct, intentional reflections of El Greco's distinct aesthetic philosophy, his unwavering belief that the deepest, most profound truths are often found beyond the visible in the realm of the spirit.
It truly is a pivotal turning point in art history, a unique and original example of both the peak of mannerism and a compelling foreshadowing of the early Baroque in Spain. It truly compels us to see with more than just our physical eyes. It asks us to engage with our entire being.
And that leads us to the provocative thought, doesn't it?
Okay.
If El Greco showed us that the truest way to see a place isn't always with your eyes, but with your soul, then what does that mean for how we view the world around us right here, right now?
Good question.
What other familiar landscapes, what buildings you pass every day, or even what everyday scenes might reveal a deeper, more profound truth, a hidden spiritual or emotional layer, if we allowed ourselves to view them through such a subjective, empathetic, or even spiritual lens? Something to ponder until our next deep dive.